31% of Americans spend more money on Halloween decorations than Christmas decor. This year, we're expected to spend $3.9 billion on Halloween decorations alone. I believe there's a slice of that pie with your name on it, whether it's from Etsy, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, or even a local crafts fair. I'm going to show you 4 Halloween-inspired projects that you can do with a modest woodshop. I'll share with you how to create candy corn, black cats, and 2 different styles of pumpkins. Now, a great thing about these projects is that they are highly batchable, which means that you can do repetitive steps that save you time and ultimately increase your profits. They're also beginner and family friendly. So if you want to include your kids or have a Halloween decoration party where everybody goes home with something that you collectively made, these are great choices.
Be sure to stick around to the end where I show you some creative lighting solutions.
Now these plans require a couple 2x4s, a 4x4, dowels, some stain, some lacquer, shellac, paint, ribbon, raffia, if I'm saying that correctly, googly eyes. The great thing about woodworking is that you don't have to follow these plans or this design to the T. You can use whatever creativity that comes to you as you're making this and run with it. It makes it your own, which makes it unique, which sells better. Unique is better than better. I've had this stack of redwood 2x4s in the rafters of my garage since I bought the house years ago. I've made quite a few different projects out of these in the past, where you get to see the red, almost pink, or rose color tones in the wood. But today, I'm gonna do something unthinkable to the wood grain purists. Paint them. The first one I wanna share is candy corn. It's a personal favorite seasonal candy of mine. And for this project, I wanted to use the most affordable tool that I could think of. And that is the miter box and handsaw. The first thing we need to do is secure the miter box to the workbench so that it doesn't move. Next, we secure the material in the box and make our first 25-degree cut. Shift the board slightly forward so that we can make our second cut. I prefer a flat top. Candies themselves are mostly rounded over, so I want to mimic that here. Now we can flip the board in position for the next cut and simply repeat this process for how many candies you wish to create. Man, that's tough, but doable. You can get a workout for sure. Hey, just a heads up, I'm gonna start cutting the wood for the next project. Feel free to jump around in the video. I've created chapters for each step of each project. You can find them in the description or by using your remote, however you're watching this. But if you're batching out projects, like I am doing right now, this is how I recommend doing it. Focusing on one task at a time. So you're just cutting, then you're sealing, then you're painting, and so on. This allows you to focus on a small step that decreases your mistakes and increases your productivity. So in the spirit of a one-tool project, I'm gonna use the jigsaw to make the cats out of this 2x4. So admittedly, I'm not the best when it comes to a jigsaw. It seems like no matter how straight the board is, or even though like I have a nice straight blade, it tends to curve. Anytime that I go around a turn, the jigsaw turns as well. The blade tucks under and it's not a straight 90 degrees. So to minimize that as much as possible, I'm gonna be using a straight edge. And in theory, if the jigsaw is just going straight, the cut should be straight as well. So the first cut is straightforward. And then mark anywhere from 8 to 12 inches from the end. They all look fine. If you're trying to sell these, make so many for a friend or a class, then you'll have to do some math to figure out the most efficient cut length. Make all of these cuts first if you're batching them out, and then move on to the ears. I'll be making one at 8 inches, 10 inches, and 12 inches. We're just going to be using a 45-degree angle from the top and cutting down to where they intersect. You'll need to place a few boards side by side to use the guide here, but if you're a skilled freehander, these will go quickly. Just like with the cats, you can make all different size pumpkins here too. Think about all the different pumpkins that you've seen throughout the years. You got short squatty ones, super wide but thin, super tall and thin. traditional, whatever. So I'm gonna go with a little squatty, a taller and slender model, and then just a traditional one so that you guys can see a bunch of different ideas. Due to the amount of cuts that's required for this one, I would highly recommend either a miter saw or a table saw. But if you didn't have any of those and you had a circular saw, this could definitely be done with some proper clamping for when you cut the 45s. For the tall pumpkin, we need 8 cuts at 12 inches and 1 cut at 16 inches for the stem. The middle pumpkin will take 8 cuts at 8 inches and 1 at 10 for the stem. Small pumpkin, we're gonna need 8 cuts at 4 inches and 1 at 7. So next we gotta take 2 boards from each stack, and we're gonna cut a 45 on all 4 corners. The rest of these boards, except for the stems, we'll only get it on 2 sides. All these repetitive steps is where the stop block comes in handy. If you're only making one, then maybe it's not worth the cost, but you can't beat the repeatability for batch work. This is another great part where you can mix up the angles to get different shapes for your pumpkins. Try maybe a 60 degree or a 30 degree, or maybe even something in between. The stems could be cut at a variety of angles as well. I'm going to do a steeper angle like 60 for the taller pumpkin stem, and maybe a 45 degree angle for the traditional one. I think I'll keep the smaller pumpkin closer to a 10 degree. Again, these subtle changes are visually appealing, especially when you're grouping the pumpkins together. Start with the stem and place 1 board on either side of it with the 2 cutoffs facing out. Then place a thin layer of glue in between them and add some clamps. Apply a thin layer of glue away from the edge so you don't get any squeeze out. Put 2 more boards on top with the cutouts facing outwards so they get covered with the last 2 boards that have all 4 corners cut out. Flip the pumpkin over, do the same thing here. The next 2 boards will be held in place with glue only, so we can remove the clamps from earlier. Apply a thin layer of glue, be sure to smear it around a little bit for better coverage, then flip the pumpkin over and do the same thing on that side. Add some clamps and let the whole pumpkin dry for at least an hour before handling it without the clamps. Last up is the 4x4 pumpkin. Well, here's a 6x6 that I couldn't bring myself to throw away. So this is the perfect opportunity to put it to use. Now because this is going to take multiple cuts, I'm going to set up a temporary stop block over here. These of course can be different heights, so I'm going to do an 8, a 10, and a 12 pattern to show you how well they work in groups. As a touch of flair,
flare.
I'm going to use this torch to gently burn the edges, corners, and then a little bit on the center and the top of these 4x4 pumpkins, or 6x6 in my case. And then I'll do the same thing for the 2x4 pumpkins as well. Once everything is cut and burned, a light sanding is in order to prevent splinters and enhance the workmanship quality. Sanding will leave a lot of dust on the surface of literally everything in your shop, including your workpiece. Using a tack cloth afterwards will ensure that you get the best finish possible. If you've never used a tack cloth before, I'll leave a link in the description for a detailed overview of exactly what it is and what it's used for. Since the pumpkins are so large, I'll be cutting the dowels at 3 inches and countersinking the hole a 1/4 inch on the top. Now these holes don't need to be centered or even at a 90-degree angle. I think because the pumpkin itself is very simple, that the imperfection of the stem works well here. The end grain on the board will soak up more paint and stain than the edge and face grain, which in turn makes the whole project look, well, off and blotchy and gross and unprofessional. Now you can properly seal this, and there's a couple of different ways to go about that. Now the first, cheapest, and easiest is to get a can of shellac or lacquer and spray the piece in multiple light coats. These will completely seal the wood, so you cannot use stain after this, but you can paint on top of it if you wish. I'll use this method on the candy corns and the cats since I'm painting them. Now the second way is by brushing on some pre-stain conditioner. This conditioner will prevent the stain or paint from penetrating too deeply into the wood, giving you that consistent finish that every woodworker is striving for. It's important to note just how much pre-stain you're putting on your workpiece. If you put on too much, it'll take longer to dry, and it's just a waste of product. You do want to wipe off the excess in about 5 minutes. I'll use this method on the 4x4, or in my case, the 6x6 pumpkins. And the third option will give you the best results possible, and that's the LVLP spray gun, which stands for low volume, low pressure. So there's a slight learning curve to this. There's more equipment that you need to have, but if you are serious about putting out finished products, especially if you're going to try to sell them, this is the way to go. So here I'm placing a piece of wood on the table where all of these projects are going to be sitting on top of. That way I can spray up underneath, and then it also does not dry to the table. Okay, so next up we're going to take some painter's tape, put it around the top of the stems, and then we're going to put on some stain using a lint-free rag. The shade is not really important here. It's more the contrast that the people will see. So use whatever you have or whatever is on sale. I prefer to use gel-based stains generally, but I'm trying to use up my water-based stuff on smaller projects where stain consistency doesn't matter as much. Allow the stain to sit for about 5 to 15 minutes depending on how dark you want it, and then wipe off any extra. After a few hours, you can tape up the stems and then lightly spray paint the bodies of the pumpkins. I would like some of the burnt grain to be seen through the paint, so we'll do this in very light coats until we like the look that we see. Painting the black hats are very easy. It's really quick coats of black spray paint. I do like the thinner coats as they dry quicker and they don't run as easily. To get the best results with the candy corn, we're gonna spray the middle orange first, then come back and paint the top and the yellow once dry. This will give it a more natural blended look. To seal the candy corns and the cats, I'm gonna be using spray shellac. Not only will the shellac seal the wood, but it'll also give it a slight gloss finish to it. When it comes to the pumpkins, I'm gonna be using General Finishes flat top coat. And that's gonna be a very matte finish just to seal it. And now it's time to add some personality to these cats. All right, so I got this package of raffia through Hobby Lobby. I don't need this much. I really just need the smallest amount. So the idea of the raffia is to create whiskers. So we'll start with the big guy. And that's a pretty good width, I think. So you can use any method that you wish to attach these, but I think a thumbtack looks the best. The tricky part would be layering them all so that the thumbtack goes through every one of them. Now I do believe mine are slightly lopsided, so I will trim this side. And you can go super silly or a little more conservative. I think I like that smaller one. Get yourself some Insta-glue. You only have about 30 seconds or so to work with this. So once it's down, make sure it gets very close to where it's going to be. Cute little cat. 2 feet of the raffia and we're going 3 feet with the ribbon. Nice big bow. Do it with just the ribbon that really holds everything in there. And now you can work on making your pretty bow. You want to get everything as flat as possible. Try to get the ribbons, the bow ears, whatever you want to call them, to match, sort of. It's not the end of the world if they don't. And if you can slide the ribbon under, I think it looks better. If the bitter ends, the loose ends of the ribbon is on the bottom. Tuck that out of the way. Get this big bow out of here. Nice and straight. This one, same. It just looks nicer if you fold the very end over, and make sure you don't get poked. Same thing for the orange pumpkin with the white ribbon. I've learned if you give yourself as much room as possible, it makes pulling this through a lot easier. Try to do this one with a smaller bow. Give it a little contrast. Same thing, fold over the end. There you go. Nice group. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, these are easy projects, family friendly, and they look great whether they're against your home or mixed in with the local landscape. I particularly had fun with the cats. I think they're very photogenic, especially the part where they're at the campfire. And then using that same light, you can put the cat in the flower bed, shine a light on it, and even though it's only 12 inches tall, it casts a shadow that's 4 feet. That's pretty sweet. Now these lights that I'm using are Logitech pumpkin lights, which come with a remote that allows you to control both of them. I'll include a link in the description below. Now happy Halloween.